Thanks, David. Thanks for having me on, and thanks to everyone for your time today. I'll just share my screen. Hopefully you can see that. Right. There's a disclaimer at the beginning of this presentation, which I'll take as read. This is on our website. Thanks everyone for your time today. In a nutshell, Vulcan is two things rolled into one. So we are a producing renewable energy company. So we have a commercial geothermal renewable energy plant, which is on your screens, in southwest Germany, in the Upper Rhine Valley bordering France. But we're also building a lithium business, and this will take over as the main business in the years to come, and will far outstrip the renewables business in terms of revenue. In doing so, in building an integrated lithium and renewable energy project, what we're doing is we're building the world's first zero carbon lithium business. So producing lithium with a net zero carbon footprint, and then a co-product or a byproduct of geothermal renewable energy as well. In doing so, we plan to produce renewable heat for more than 1 million people by 2030. We're mostly producing renewable power at the moment. We're increasingly ramping up the renewable heating side of the business. And we're aiming to produce enough lithium hydroxide for around about 1 million electric vehicles per annum, obviously depending on battery chemistry. That represents the first 2 phases of our production, which would be around 50,000 tons per annum lithium hydroxide. In doing so, and this is the key differentiator, we aim to avoid about 1 million tons of CO2 emissions per annum. So a really significant decarbonising effect once the project is up and running. The project looks a bit like this. It is not a mine, that's the first thing to say. So it looks actually a lot like an integrated oil and gas project, just minus the oil and gas. So we've got your well sites in the upstream, which are producing hot lithium-rich brine from between 2 and 4 kilometers depth in the Upper Rhine Graben. So we're producing brine already. We have producing wells already into this system. And that then gets pumped to a renewable energy plant where you produce heat and power. And this is baseload renewable energy. So it really is the holy grail of renewable energy at the moment. You then sell that power and heat into the grid. On the power side, we get a nice feed-in tariff. On the heat side, you typically have an offtake agreement with the local consumer. And then what normally happens is the brine gets re-injected back into the reservoir and then gets heated up again. But what we do this time is we pass it through what we call our lithium extraction plant, or LEP. And there we pass the brine through a series of columns, and we use a technique which has been used in the industry commercially since 1996, called adsorption type direct lithium extraction. So the brine touches a series of columns where the brine comes into contact with some aluminate-based adsorbent resin. And the resin basically takes the lithium chloride out of the brine and leaves everything else in. The brine then gets re-injected minus the lithium. The lithium then gets washed off using a water strip. So it's a very low reagent process. The loading is driven by the heat and the salinity, and the unloading is driven by water. So once again, the lithium is following the salinity gradient. Commercial producers who use this technique use gas to heat up the brine. We don't use gas. Our key differentiator is our waste brine off the geothermal plant is still warm. It's about 60 degrees after the energy generation process. And that's the perfect temperature to run the lithium extraction. So that's our unique differentiator. Our heat comes from a renewable source, not a fossil fuel source. Then we produce a lithium chloride concentrate, about a 40% lithium chloride concentrate, which gets transported to the last step of the process, where we have what we call our central lithium plant, which produces lithium hydroxide. And that uses electrolysis using commercially available chlor-alkali cells. It's a process that's been used for over 100 years in the chlor-alkali industry, and the only difference is we're employing lithium chloride instead of sodium chloride to drive the process. But it's a very well understood, very well-known process. Throughout this whole process, we produce more renewable energy than we consume. So it's a net negative actually process, because we're decarbonising the grid with the excess energy that we sell. It's a net carbon negative process. But for simplicity's sake, we call it the Zero Carbon Lithium project. And that's the unique differentiator for us. It's been a bit of a journey to get to this point. So we were founded in 2018 as a startup. My background is I was previously in hard rock lithium, and I was involved in developing some assets in the Pilbara, which became part of the Pilbara Minerals project and is now in production, supplying the Asian market. So Vulcan was really my lithium 2.0, and I started it with a chap called Dr. Horst Freuter, who's a geothermal expert, because we're focused on developing these geothermal brines. And really, we started with the goal of zero carbon lithium, working backwards from there. How do we develop this? Over the journey, we've built a lot of in-house lithium extraction expertise, particularly this type of lithium extraction. And we've acquired 4 German companies along the journey as well, 2 engineering companies, 1 drilling contract labor company, and 1 producing renewable energy company as well. We've raised about 500 million Australian over the journey as well, including investments by Hancock Prospecting, and also from Stellantis, which is the world's 5th largest automaker, includes brands such as Peugeot, Citroën, Opel, Fiat, Chrysler, Jeep, etc. So Stellantis is our 2nd largest shareholder, and we have 5 binding lithium hydroxide agreements signed with Stellantis, but also with Volkswagen, Renault, Umicore, and LG. So we've sold out the first 5 years of production. We've gone through scoping study, EFS and DFS. Now we're in our bridging study phase, so we're aiming to get to a Class 2 estimate, and we're basically going into that execution phase of the project. We've got about 240 million Aussie cash, which we're deploying towards execution. We need to raise a lot more, to be clear, to build this project, but we are deploying our cash towards preparatory CapEx work. So we're already getting into that execution mode. The rubber is hitting the road. I won't go into detail on this, just in the interest of time, but Europe needs a lot of lithium, and it needs it very quickly. It's the fastest growing lithium market in the world. It has zero supply, and the Europeans also want their battery raw materials to be low carbon or net zero carbon. And that's driven by the customer demands. And Europe needs a lot of renewable energy as well. Trying to get off Russian gas has been difficult. There is a supply shortage of renewable power and renewable heat in Europe. And there is a very strong focus on developing geothermal projects in Germany for that reason. So Europe is backing both critical raw materials production. Lithium is at the top of the list, and renewable energy production and development in Europe. And this is causing a lot of regulatory tailwinds. And also now, finally, it's taken a while, funding mechanisms as well compete with the IRA as well. And this is largely coming through the member states. So France and Germany in particular will be funding their own projects, and we intend to be part of that. So a lot of regulatory and hopefully government financing tailwinds behind our industry. Just to zoom into our project, so it looks a bit like this. There's essentially there's an upstream and there's a downstream. There's a central collection point for the brine. You can see two of these geothermal plants already exist. We're operating these. We're building a large one in the center of our phase 1 area, and these will be fed by multiple well sites, including some of the ones that exist already. We're basically going to expand the existing brine production, and therefore expands the geothermal energy production and then the lithium production as well. And then on the downstream side, we will be located at a chemical park called Frankfurt Höchst. So we're building a chemical plant within the chemical park. So that makes it a lot easier. This is what it looks like with a bird's eye view. So we're in southwest Germany, remember, so bordering northeast France. We're in the Bunter Sandstone reservoir. This has been producing geothermal brine for many years. A lot of data stretching back many years, so the brine is very well understood. We are producing from the core of the field here at our Insheim plant and the Landau plant nearby. We're expanding production from this area, and we'll be transporting the lithium chloride upstream downstream to the central lithium plant at Frankfurt Höchst. The bigger picture, though, is that we are the largest license holder in the Upper Rhine Valley. So once we've executed phase 1, and we're focused on doing that really efficiently and really well, we aim to print and repeat. So phase 1 is about 24,000 tons per annum of lithium hydroxide production at 30 megawatts power, 30 megawatts heat. we aim to print and repeat beyond that, phase 2, phase 3, etc. And we have room in our chemical plant to do so. It's basically adding more and more trains of production in the upstream and the downstream. So there's quite a modular effect there. The important point is we're not resource constrained. The resource that we've defined so far is very, very large. It's one of the largest in the world. It's certainly the largest in Europe. 26 million tons of contained lithium carbonate equivalent. So this is a really large brine resource in the center of Europe, very close to end user customers such as Stellantis and Volkswagen, Umicore as well. So we are already expanding into France. The French are moving very quickly in this space as well. The resource doesn't stop at the border. So we've got some license applications, one of which is together with Stellantis actually. And we're also pushing mostly to the north of where we are on the German side as well. Wherever we build more lithium production, we can also build more renewable energy production as well. And there is no shortage of renewable heating supply, renewable heating demand, I should say. We have our own in-house drilling company, essentially onshore oil and gas rigs. They are electric, so we can keep our footprint net zero carbon. And we have our own in-house drilling crews as well. This is important because drilling gear, drill rigs are in short supply in Germany, and everyone's rushing to develop geothermal projects in the area. So we have 2 out of about 12 rigs are available in the country. We have a very long life sustainable resource. So we've modeled phase 1 area over 30 years, and we see a very stable, steady decline of the lithium grades over time. And up to 30 years, we're still well above our cost grade. So this is a long life, multi-decade asset. When we finish producing lithium someday, and we're recycling all the lithium, what we leave behind is not a mine, it's a renewable energy asset. So there's a nice sort of circular story there. Our mine looks like this. It's a renewable energy plant. It's the size of a small supermarket. And basically, we're going to be building more of these. You can see that we're surrounded by gardens, by vineyards, by fields. So this is what we think lithium production in Europe can look like, and indeed elsewhere in the world as well, where we can apply this technology. We are building a couple of things. So we're commissioning our lithium extraction optimization plant. This is basically like a commercial demo, and this will serve as a product qualification and training facility over the next couple of years once we build a full phase 1 lithium extraction plant. So commissioning of this plant will be completed in the next couple of months, and it will start producing the first tons of lithium chemicals ever domestically produced in Europe. We're using a process which is very efficient. I won't go into details in the interest of time. And for that reason, it is increasingly used in the lithium industry. And indeed, we see a wave of new lithium projects coming on stream, mainly from mining companies at the moment. Livent, Rio Tinto, Eramet are also building adsorption type DLE projects. But interestingly, the next wave we see after this is coming from the oil and gas sector, because they can deploy the skills and the personnel and the equipment they already have to increase lithium from brine production at a much larger scale. It's sustainable, they can decarbonise their operations, and they can redeploy their gear and personnel. So ExxonMobil, Oxy, SLB, a lot of big players are entering the space, which makes it exciting. Once again, our only key differentiator from the existing producers using this technology, renewable heat, not heat from gas. We've had 3 years of laboratory test work and piloting. We built our own pilot plants. We have our own Vulcan labs in Germany. We've developed our own sorbents, because the sorbents that you can buy on the markets are all produced in China and Russia. So we produce ours in France. We call it VUL. It is in-house intellectual property, but it's based off a commercially proven technology. It was actually invented in the 70s, absorption type DLE, so very well understood. For alkali, as we said, we're building a chemical plant within the chemical park. We have secured our site for this, and once again, there will be an optimization plant which will serve as a product qualification and training facility as well, whilst the commercial plant gets built. So we have our site secured, and we're ready to go. And we've built our execution team. We've got about 320 personnel now in-house at Vulcan. So the team is big, they are very motivated, and we've got some fantastic people from the oil and gas, geothermal, and lithium industries, and really ready to go into execution mode. So once again, the rubber is hitting the road. We will have a material decarbonizing effect on the industry. The lithium industry is pretty carbon intensive at the moment, and we intend to produce essentially the lowest carbon lithium in the world for electric vehicles, but also with low water footprint and small land footprint as well. So it is engineered to have very high environmental performance, and this should affect our bottom line as well. So we should see cheaper borrowing, lower cost of capital, because we are classified by many as a green project. Local community support, very important. The byproduct that we produce is renewable district heating. So a lot of support comes from that. And we have a very strong focus on community works as a result. On the financing side, we should have a very low operating cost. We have favourable offtake agreements fixed, and this is important in a volatile lithium pricing environment. But because we have that low operating cost, we're very well insulated from the ups and downs in the lithium market in the years to come. But we see an enormous demand for our offtakers for more productive we can produce it. This gives us very healthy financial metrics. So just from phase one, 2.6 billion euro post-tax NPV, 26% post-tax IRR, and that's including the whole integrated project, so renewable energy, lithium extraction, and lithium refining. This gives us a capex of about 1.5 billion euro. We have very low OPEX. I'd say our capex is sort of, it's in the middle, remembering that we're also building the renewable energy part of the business as well. We've engaged BNP Paribas on the financing. We've had a very successful market sounding exercise for that financing, and we will officially kick off debt and equity financing in November, aiming to raise the equity side at project level. And that's where the interest of the oil and gas guys comes in, because we've been receiving a lot of interest there. So we'll start to hopefully see some movement on there and firm up that interest. So just to finish off, I know with time, but just to cover from on the main points, we are the world's first and only zero carbon lithium company. We're moving into the execution phase now. We're well funded. We have some very supportive and deep-pocketed substantial investors in the company. We have very strong off-takers. We have a fantastic team. We have the largest lithium resource in Europe. We have in-house lithium extraction IP optimization plants will be up and running in the next few weeks and months, producing the first tons of lithium product in Europe. And we're moving into building Europe's largest and hopefully the world's most sustainable lithium project. So very excited about the weeks and months to come.
Thanks, Francis. A great presentation, and clearly Vulcan, a company that many have watched over a long period of time, and it continues to kick goals for investors. A large number of questions have come through, so we'll get straight to it. Situation in Europe, what is it like? You're on the ground, and your team are on the ground. What's it like? People, I think, expected it to move or react quicker than to what happened in the US, but they don't sort of understand the EU is a member state and it has to go through a process. But what is the situation like, and what does government support potentially look like?
So the EU is a very slow-moving organisation. There's no getting around that. They've got to deal with the member states pulling in lots of different directions. They can't move as quickly as the US, as a simple fact. So they have been knocked a bit by the IRA in the battery sector, renewable sectors, because the US has moved much quicker. But they are now responding, and what they've done is quite smart. So they're freeing up the member states to fund their own projects. So usually they can't do that because of anti-competition law in the EU. In this special case, they've used existing pots of funds, which don't need to be reapproved, that were approved as part of the Ukraine crisis and COVID, and said, Germany, France, whoever else, you go ahead, you use these existing pots of funds. It's called a Temporary Crisis and Transition Framework, or TCTF. And there's significant funding available under this to fund critical raw materials projects like ours. There's also similar schemes on the renewable energy side as well. So the best thing they could do is just free up the member states to go and fund their own projects. If you're in Eastern Europe, that's not so great because there's less funding to go around. If you're in Germany and France, as we are, fortunately, that's quite a good position to be in because they're obviously well-financed states.
And from a permitting point of view, from a financing point of view, are there other opportunities?
Yeah, so there's this strategic project status, which we'll be applying for, which essentially should further speed up permitting. But honestly, our permitting is going pretty well at the moment. We've got really good engagement with the authorities. I'd say we're pretty much uniformly backed by all sides of the political spectrum in Europe. Everybody wants this. It contributes to the auto industry, which is the biggest industry in Germany. It's national critical raw material security, and they are very alive to that now. So, I mean, last time I went over to Germany, we saw federal ministers in Germany. You know, we had the honor to sort of sit down with some of the main decision makers in the space. So they are taking what we're doing very seriously. And I hope, I can't promise, but I hope that that's going to translate into significant funding assistance as well, which should help us with this financing process. But let's see. We won't rely on that, but we're certainly hoping for some assistance.
And with anything of this nature, there are risks. What are the key risks, and how are you looking to deal with those? So
we see it, our technical and execution focused executives who come from the chemicals industry, the oil and gas industry, the lithium industry, they really see the main risk here as execution risks, not technical risks. So we're very comfortable with the technology, the technical side of things. Now it's all about making sure that we smoothly and efficiently execute. And that's where the expertise of these, particularly the oil and gas guys, comes in, because they're used to, an integrated project and the interface management, fitting all the different parts of the project together. So it's that project execution mentality which we're getting into. And we've got some great guys who joined us in the last few months, including the CEO, Chris Marino, who replaced me as CEO. I've moved to the chair role. And that really reflects moving into execution mode. So execution risk, but I think we've got some really good people to push that forward.
There's a good question here in regards to DLE and how that's changing the industry. How do you see it changing the industry, and what are some other trends that investors should be looking out for?
So I think I see it as hard rock was nearly 10 years ago. Hard rock was a really tough sell in 2014, 2015. I was pitching it to investors and it was seen as too high cost. Everyone said that the brines were just going to blow them out of the water. And we all know what happened next. DLE, I mean, it's been around since 96, but now we're seeing rapidly increasing adoption and building of these projects. They have the ability to produce at much lower cost and with a much lower CO2 footprint as well. So I think, we still need hard rock. It's not a zero-sum game, but I think you're going to see a much bigger wave of supply come in, backed by mining guys and the oil and gas guys. The key thing to watch out for, not all DLE is the same. So it's a catch-all term. That's why we say adsorption type DLE. Look out for companies that are doing adsorption type DLE, because that's the commercially proven method. And look out for companies. Obviously, I'm talking up my own book here, but it's easy to sort of say you're going to buy from a technology supplier, but then, as we've seen, typically these companies give away a slice of their project as a result. Look out for companies like Emit, like Livent, like ourselves, who've built up their own in-house teams, who know how to make and operate these ordnance. So I think that's really important as well.
Final question, key catalysts. What should investors and those watching today be focused on over the coming months?
So look out for us commissioning and bringing into operation the lithium extraction optimization plant, producing the first tons of material ever produced in Europe. That will be, hopefully, it will be a major proof point for investors. We've done this at pilot scale. Now we're going to do it at a much larger scale. So I think that will be a really good psychological point for financiers, for investors, for strategics watching us. That will happen over the next couple of months. So it's an exciting point. And then look out for our financing process. I think you'd be surprised at the interest that we're getting around that and where that interest is coming from. I think once we see the blocks sort of falling into place on the financing, I think that will be really one of the final risks of the project taken away as well. Look out for updates on execution, remaining permits coming in, and the builds starting to happen all the time. All of those, I think, are very important catalysts and proof points to de-risk the project. So a lot's going to happen over the next few weeks and months, and watch this space.
As you say, it's been very busy over the last few years, and it's going to be busy still, which investors like to see. They like to see news flow and they like to see activity. So Vulcan, a company to watch. We look forward to watching with interest. Francis, thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, David. Thanks for having me on. Thanks everyone for your time. Cheers.